34 hours flying for this. Where is my bright green suitcase? Are you joking me?
Drop that bag right now, or I will follow you to your village. That was Pearl Milan, 26 years old, postgraduate scholarship recipient, holder of a perfectly valid Korean student visa, and a woman who had not slept in 19 hours, screaming at a conveyor belt at Incheon International Airport like it had personally wronged her ancestors. Which, honestly at this point, it had. She had been on 3 connecting flights. 3. Lagos to Addis Ababa to Doha, Doha to Seoul. Her back hurt. Her edges were crying. She had eaten 1 sad bread roll and half a cup of orange juice that tasted like a rumor. All she wanted, all she had been thinking about for the past 19 hours, was to collect her suitcase, get to her university dormitory, and sleep for 45 years. The suitcase was not on the belt. She watched every other suitcase in the world go by. A purple one, a green one, a tartan one that looked like it belonged to a Scottish grandfather. A child's cartoon suitcase with wheels that lit up pink. She watched a woman collect 3 identical black bags like it was nothing. She watched a man in a linen suit collect a vintage trunk as if he had all the time in the world and the nerve to use it. No pearl suitcase. She walked to the lost luggage counter. The woman behind the counter looked at her with the specific energy of someone who had seen this exact situation 400 times today. Name: Pearl Milan. My bag is green. Bright green. With a red ribbon tied on the handle because I specifically did not want this to happen. The woman typed. Typed more. Squinted at the screen. Typed again as if maybe typing harder would help. Ms. Milan, your bag was rerouted. Rerouted where? We are not sure yet. Pearl stared at her. You are not sure. Where? My bag went. It may be on a later flight. Or. A pause. Or, it may have been collected in error by another passenger. Pearl put both hands flat on the counter. She breathed in slowly through her nose. She breathed out. She said very calmly, if someone has collected my bag in error, I need you to find them because that bag has my medication, my documents, my laptop, my grandmother's portrait, and 6 months of carefully chosen skincare products that I cannot replace in this country. So please, with all due respect, locate it. The woman clicked and typed and made a face that communicated very clearly that this was above her pay grade. And that was when Pearl saw it. Over by the VIP exit. A black luxury bag on a trolley, being handled by 2 men in suits. Nothing remarkable about that. Except tied to the handle of that sleek, expensive, aggressively unbothered black bag, was a faded red ribbon. Her ribbon. Her bag. Well, someone had swapped the interiors. Obviously. Because the outside was different. Hers was bright green, this one was jet black. But that ribbon was from her mother's wrapper fabric, and she had tied it herself at 4 a.m. in Lagos while her aunties watched and said, "You will forget something." And she had said, "I will not forget anything," and tied it tighter. That was her ribbon. "That is my ribbon," she shouted, pointing. Every head in the arrivals hall turned. "Ma'am, do not ma'am me. That is my ribbon on that bag. Someone swapped it. I need that bag right now." She was already moving. Past the counter, past the confused official, through the little rope barrier that technically said authorized personnel only. But Pearl was authorized by God and the red ribbon, so she walked right past it. The 2 suited men turned at the sound of her footsteps. One of them stepped forward, hand raised. He was large. His suit was expensive. His face said he had been trained to block exactly this kind of approach. "Ma'am, this is a restricted area. That is my bag. This bag belongs to. I don't care who it belongs to right now. I need to check something." She pointed directly at the red ribbon. "You see that? That is from my mother's osso oak fabric. Ankara. I tied it at 4 a.m. in Lagos. So unless your CEO also had an auntie standing over him at 4 a.m. in Lagos tying a red ribbon onto his bag, I suggest you step aside." There was a pause. The security man looked at the ribbon. He looked at Pearl. He looked at the ribbon again. He had not been trained for this. And then, from the far end of the VIP corridor, a voice said, flat, controlled, deeply unimpressed, "What is the problem?" It was not a question. It never was with people who spoke like that. Joon-ho walked like someone who had never once in his adult life been late for anything, never rushed, never needed to. 32 years old, CEO of KangStar Group, the 3rd largest conglomerate in South Korea. He had the kind of face that belonged on the cover of a financial magazine under a headline like, He has more money than your country's GDP, and he knows it. Dark suit. No tie. Impeccable posture. He was carrying one black bag identical to the one on the trolley, which meant either he had two, or the one on the trolley was not his. He looked at Pearl. Pearl looked at him. She pointed at the bag. That has my ribbon on it. He looked at the bag. He looked at the ribbon. He looked at her. That is my bag. Then explain the ribbon. That ribbon is a standard. It is not standard, it is also oak fabric from Lagos, Nigeria, and I tied it myself because airport bags look the same, and I was trying to avoid exactly this situation which has still somehow happened. She paused. Took a breath. I think someone swapped the contents. My bag was green. Now my contents are in your black bag. Can we please just open it and check? Something flickered across Joon-ho's face. Not emotion exactly. More like a recalculation. You want to open my bag. I want to find my things. He turned to his security man. In Korean, he said, Who is this woman? The security man in Korean said, She says she owns the bag. Secretary Kim, who had appeared from nowhere the way secretaries always did, leaned in and said, also in Korean, Sir. She came through the international arrivals section very aggressively. She bypassed the barrier. She identified the bag from across the room. He paused. She might be the auditor. Joon-ho's eyes cut to him. The auditor was not supposed to arrive until Thursday. Maybe she came early. For surveillance purposes. That does not make. She identified a personal item from 40 meters away, sir. Through a crowd. Joon-ho looked at Pearl again. She was staring back at him with the exhausted, righteous fury of a woman who had been awake for 19 hours and wanted her skincare back. She is either very good, Secretary Kim whispered, or she is insane. What is the difference? About 40 meters and a red ribbon, sir. Joon-ho said in English to Pearl. Are you from the Regulatory Commission? Pearl blinked. The what? The Financial Regulatory Commission. I am from Lagos. That is not what I asked. It is what I answered. She pointed again at the bag. Can we please just? I will have this investigated, he said. Come. Come where? The car. What car? I don't need a car, I need a suitcase. But two of the security men had already picked up the trolley with the bag and were walking briskly toward the VIP exit. And Joon-ho was already walking behind them, and Secretary Kim was walking behind him. And the security woman from the lost luggage counter had disappeared entirely, and Pearl stood there for exactly 3 seconds before she thought, my laptop is in that bag, and followed. She would regret this. Obviously. But she didn't know that yet. Hey, if you're just finding this channel, welcome. Drop in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there, because this story is going global, and I need to know which time zones are losing their minds right now. If you're already subscribed, I see you and I love you. If you're not, hit that subscribe button right now because what's about to happen to Pearl is going to need multiple episodes, and you cannot miss a single one. Like, share, and let's go. The car was a black Mercedes S-Class with tinted windows and interior lighting that hummed at a frequency Pearl associated with obscenely wealthy people. She got in because the bag got in, and the bag had her laptop and her grandmother's portrait, and she was not leaving without either. She sat across from Joon-ho. Secretary Kim sat up front next to the driver. The driver pulled out of the airport without being told to, because apparently Joon-ho's driver already knew where to go at all times through some sort of sixth sense of corporate obedience. Stop the car, Pearl said. The driver did not stop the car. Excuse me. I said stop the car. From the front seat, Secretary Kim pressed a button on his earpiece and said quietly to someone on the other end, Initiate advance protocol. She is already in motion. Pearl turned to Joon-ho. Did he just say initiate advance protocol? For me? Why does anyone need a protocol for me? I am a student. I study urban planning. I want to sleep. Joon-ho said nothing. He was looking at his phone, scrolling through something. He had the focused stillness of a man who had decided to observe rather than engage, which was the most annoying possible response to everything Pearl had just said. Driver, please stop. I need to go to my university dormitory. Yonsei University. I have an address. I have a map downloaded. I have everything I need except my bag, which is currently in this car, so if you could just stop for 5 minutes so I can check the bag. The driver said something in Korean. Secretary Kim translated without turning around. He says we are proceeding to KangStar headquarters per standard executive arrival protocol. I am not part of any executive arrival protocol. The protocol accommodates unexpected personnel. I am not unexpected personnel. I am a lost person who followed a red ribbon into a car. Secretary Kim pressed his earpiece again. Confirm. Unexpected personnel is verbal and assertive. Possibly high level. He nodded at whatever was said to him. Understood. Pearl turned fully to Joon-ho, who had finally put his phone down. He was looking at her the way people looked at very complicated problems they hadn't finished solving yet. She said, "Who are you?" Joon-ho. Is that supposed to mean something to me? A pause so long it had its own economy. Yes. It does not. I landed 4 hours ago. I know no one in Seoul. I am tired and hungry, and I just want my bag and my dormitory and if possible some rice. Can someone please explain what is happening? Secretary Kim turned around in his seat for the first time. He had a round face, very earnest eyes, and the expression of a man carrying 17 secret burdens with complete professionalism. Ms. Milan, he said carefully, we understand you may have operational reasons for maintaining your cover. We completely respect the terms of discretion. Pearl stared at him. My cover. We will not ask you to reveal anything. My cover. We will simply proceed to headquarters and allow you to conduct your assessment as planned. What assessment? Of what? I am a student. Of course, Secretary Kim said, nodding slowly in the way of a man who absolutely did not believe her. Pearl looked at Joon-ho. Is everyone in this car having a medical emergency? Joon-ho almost smiled. Almost. You arrived at the airport. You immediately identified a restricted piece of luggage from a significant distance. You bypassed security. You are traveling alone. You claim to be a student, but carry yourself like someone conducting surveillance. I carry myself like someone who is angry and tired. In my experience, those are not mutually exclusive with being a government auditor. Pearl pressed both hands to her face. She breathed in. She breathed out. She said into her palms, I am going to cry. I am genuinely going to cry in this car. There is water in the console. I don't want water, I want my life. The car did not stop. KangStar Group headquarters was the kind of building that existed to make other buildings feel bad about themselves. 42 floors of glass and steel in the middle of Gangnam, with a lobby floor made of marble that probably cost more than Pearl's entire scholarship. The moment the car pulled up, 3 people materialized from inside the building and opened the car door before the driver had even fully stopped. Pearl got out because the bag was getting out. She looked up at the building. The building looked down at her. She said, No. Nobody heard her. Everyone was already moving. Inside, the lobby was enormous and very quiet in the way that places with serious money were always quiet. Not because nothing was happening, but because everything that was happening at a frequency designed to exclude people without the right shoes. Pearl's shoes were Converse. They squeaked on the marble in a way that felt deeply personal. Every person at every desk looked up as they walked through. Why is everyone staring? Pearl whispered. They are being respectful, Secretary Kim said. They are staring at me like I am a problem they haven't categorized yet. Yes, Secretary Kim said. That is also correct. They went into an elevator. The elevator was mirrored on all 4 walls. Pearl caught her reflection, wrinkled clothes from 19 hours of travel, hair that had started ambitious and was now making different choices, eyes that had the hollow determination of someone running entirely on stubbornness. She looked like exactly what she was, a person having the worst arrival day of her life. Joon-ho was standing next to her in the mirror. He was looking at her reflection. She turned and looked at his actual face. Can I have the bag now? When we reach the conference room. Why the conference room? Because it is more appropriate. More appropriate than what? More appropriate than giving a person their own bag in an elevator? That is a very low bar, and I am still somehow below it. Something moved in his jaw. Not a smile, but adjacent to one. The conference room was on the 38th floor and had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. Under normal circumstances, Pearl would have found this breathtaking. Under these circumstances, she found it to be an elaborate backdrop for her suffering. There was a long table. There were about 15 people already seated at it. They all stood up when Joon-ho entered. They all looked at Pearl. Pearl looked at them. She said to Joon-ho very quietly, Why are all of them here? Joon-ho said, equally quietly, This is our weekly executive review. Then why did you bring me to your weekly executive review? Because you are here. That is not a reason. Everyone at the table flinched slightly. Secretary Kim made a small sound. Joon-ho gestured to the chair at the head of the table. His chair, she would realize later, the one facing the full window view, the one that everyone at the table oriented themselves toward. He said, with complete sincerity, "Please." Pearl did not want to sit down, but her feet hurt, and there was a plate of something on the table that looked like it might be food. She had not eaten a real meal in 19 hours. She sat down. Everyone else sat down. One of the executives, older, gray-haired, with the rigid posture of someone who had been waiting to be catastrophized, leaned forward and said in careful English, "We are honored by your early arrival." "I am not early for anything," Pearl said. "I am exactly where I didn't intend to be." A murmur went around the table. Two of the executives whispered to each other in Korean. Pearl caught the words ahead of schedule and strategic positioning. She said, "Is there any food? I haven't eaten since Doha." Another murmur. More whispering. Someone at the far end of the table said very quietly in Korean, "She is testing us to see if we prioritize hospitality over procedure." Brilliant. Secretary Kim materialized at her elbow with a plate of food so fast it was almost supernatural. Rice. Soup. Banchan. A glass of water. A glass of juice. A folded napkin placed with ceremony. Pearl stared at it. She said, "Thank you." The room held its breath like she had just announced dividend increases. She picked up her spoon and began to eat, and the room very carefully, very professionally, pretended this was completely normal and also perhaps the most significant thing that had happened all quarter. Joon-ho sat down at the seat to her right. Not the head, not where he would normally sit, because she was now in that seat. He watched her eat with the expression of a man recalculating every assumption he'd made in the last 40 minutes. Someone cleared their throat. Chief Financial Officer Park, 60 years old, three-piece suit, the eyes of a man who had survived 12 corporate restructurings and was not afraid of anything, said, "Shall we begin the review?" "By all means," Pearl said, because she was eating and had nothing else to contribute. First item, the proposed merger with Daejeon Biotech. "Fine," Pearl said, eating her rice. Another murmur. She pre-approved it. "She didn't say," someone started. She said fine. That's not. In regulatory language, fine indicates preliminary non-objection, which is essentially a green light for the preliminary stage. Pearl swallowed and looked up. "I said fine as in okay, continue talking. I wasn't telling you to stop." Silence. "But also," she said, because she was eating and irritable and 19 hours of exhaustion had removed her diplomatic filter entirely. "Why is the merger document 43 pages long? My professors have been sending me 43-page documents for 3 years, and none of them have ever needed to be 43 pages. Whatever you're doing with Daejeon, you could explain it in 6. CFO Park stared at her. He had worked in Korean corporate finance for 35 years. He had never been told a 43-page document could be 6 pages. He found this simultaneously offensive and deeply interesting. One of the younger executives was typing very fast. Someone at the end of the table whispered, "She's right." "She can't be right. She just got here." "That's why she's right. She doesn't have to be polite about it yet." Another executive leaned toward his neighbor. "Should we pause the review?" "She told us not to pause." She said by all means. She was being sarcastic. "How do you know?" "Because she was eating rice and looking at us like we were collectively disappointing her. That could be her natural expression. Her natural expression is, 'I want to go home.' This one is, 'Why are you like this?'" Pearl looked at the two of them. They both went very still. She said, "What is item 2? CFO Park, who had been waiting for this with the patient terror of a man standing next to a very unpredictable weather system, said, "Staff restructuring in the Busan division." "Why?" "We are reallocating resources." "Are you firing people?" The room flinched. "We are optimizing the workforce." "That means firing people." "It means strategic right-sizing." "It means firing people," Pearl said, putting down her spoon. "I am not telling you whether to fire people. I am asking you to say the real word for the thing you're doing. Because if you can't say the real word for it in this room, you're definitely not saying it correctly to the people it's happening to. And those people deserve to hear the real word." The silence that followed was the kind that companies paid very large consulting firms to manufacture and could never actually achieve organically. One executive at the far end of the table was gripping his pen so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. Not from stress. From the effort of not saying, "She's completely right," out loud again. Joon-ho said very quietly, to no one in particular, She's completely right. Everyone turned to look at him. He did not appear to notice. He was looking at Pearl. She looked at him. She said, "I'm a student." He said, "I know. I'm not an auditor." "I know. So why are you looking at me like I just solved something?" "Because you did. I said the word firing. In this building," he said, "that takes more than you think." Pearl looked at the table of executives. They were all watching this exchange with the focused attention of people at a theater who had not expected the second act to go this direction. She picked up her spoon again. She ate more rice. She said, "What is item 3? CFO Park checked his notes with the expression of a man who had planned a meeting and was now attending a completely different one. Item 3, the quarterly earnings presentation format. What about it? We are considering a redesign. Of what? The slide deck. How many slides? Currently 74. Pearl looked at the ceiling. 74 slides. It is a comprehensive. Who is your audience? Institutional investors and board members. Do institutional investors and board members have the time or patience for 74 slides? A pause. No, said someone at the far end of the table. It was the junior executive who had tweeted about her, speaking for the first time. He said it very quietly, and then appeared to want to return to invisibility. No, Pearl agreed. 12 slides. Maximum. Everything else goes in an appendix for people who want the detail. You lead with the number that matters, you explain why it happened, you explain what comes next. That is 3 slides of real content and 9 of supporting material. She ate more rice. And the font size on whatever you're currently using is too small. I can tell from here. The junior executive, who had clearly been saying this internally for months, made a sound that was not quite a cheer, but in the same family as one. CFO Park looked at Joon-ho. Joon-ho looked at Pearl. Pearl was eating her soup. CFO Park said, "Should we take a short break?" "You can do whatever you need," Pearl said. "I am going to finish eating. This soup is very good." "Thank you," said a voice from the doorway. Everyone turned. The kitchen staff member who had prepared the food had come to collect the empty serving dishes and had heard the compliment. She bowed, delighted. She said something in Korean. Secretary Kim translated. "She says she is honored and asks if you would like more." "Yes, please," Pearl said. The kitchen staff member disappeared with visible happiness. And somehow, in the middle of all of it, the whispering executives and the recalculating CEO and the 43-page merger document and the 74-slide deck. Pearl Milan sat at the head of a boardroom table 40 floors above Seoul eating soup that someone had made with care and felt, for the first time since the airport, something that was almost okay. Not peace. Not yet. But adjacent to it. Joon-ho was looking at Pearl with an expression that was definitely not admiration. It was something more complicated than admiration. It was the look of a man whose categories for people were not quite big enough for the thing currently sitting at his conference table eating his rice. Pearl finished her food. She put down her spoon. She looked at the room. She said, "My bag. Please." The black bag was brought to her immediately. She opened it and found, with the specific relief of someone who has been carrying anxiety in their chest for 6 hours, her medication, her documents, her laptop, her grandmother's portrait, and 6 months of carefully chosen skincare products, all present and accounted for. She pulled out the portrait. Her grandmother's face, broad forehead, bright eyes, the look of a woman who had never suffered fools and passed that trait down genetically. Pearl said quietly, "Okay. We're okay, Grandma." Half the executives at the table looked moved. The other half looked confused. One of them was writing in a notebook with the intensity of someone documenting history. Pearl looked up at Joon-ho. "Thank you for the food. I need to go to Yonsei University now. Can someone call me a taxi?" Joon-ho opened his mouth. His phone rang. He looked at it. His expression, which had been carefully neutral, shifted into something that could only be described as controlled dread. Secretary Kim appeared at his shoulder and whispered, "Sir, your grandmother is in the building." Joon-ho closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. When he opened them, his face was composed again, but in the specific way of someone who had just heard very bad news and decided to survive it through sheer professionalism. "Which floor?" "She is currently in the lobby, sir. She has already photographed the receptionist." "Why?" "She says the receptionist looks like a good match for her nephew. Her nephew is 12. She says he will grow." Pearl was watching this exchange with her bag on her lap, and the expression of someone who wanted to leave, but was stuck in traffic. The elevator doors opened and Chairwoman Kang Bok-soon walked into the conference room. She was 71 years old, 5 feet nothing, wearing a pink hanbok jacket over a cream blouse, carrying a tote bag that said, "I survived the IMF crisis and all I got was this tote." And she had the energy of a woman who had never once in her life arrived at the wrong time because she personally decided what the right time was. She looked at the room. The room looked at her. Everyone stood up. She looked at Pearl. Pearl looked at her. Grandma Kang said in Korean, which Secretary Kim translated in a desperate whisper to Pearl. "Who is this?" "She is," Joon-ho started. "She is sitting in your chair. She is eating your food in your chair. Grandmother. She has a face like someone who has seen through nonsense." The old woman walked the length of the table, ignoring 15 executives standing at attention like schoolchildren, and stopped in front of Pearl. She looked at her for a very long moment. Then she said in accented but clear English, "You. What is your name?" "Pearl Milan." "Where are you from?" "Lagos, Nigeria." "Lagos." Grandma Kang nodded slowly. "Strong women come from Lagos." "They do," Pearl agreed, because this was simply true. "You sat at the head of this table." "I sat where I was told to sit." "Nobody tells the men here where to sit. They chose to give you the chair." Pearl looked at Joon-ho. Joon-ho looked very specifically at the window. Grandma Kang turned to the room and said in Korean very loudly, "She is a blessing." She turned back to Pearl. Then, also in Korean, but to the room, "This is the woman who will fix this family's fortune. She sits at the head. She eats without asking permission. She brings a grandmother's portrait as her most important item." She pressed both hands over her heart. "She is our bride." Pearl said, "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" Secretary Kim translated. Pearl said, "Could you not translate that?" He had already translated it. Joon-ho made a sound that was absolutely not a sound a CEO made in public. It was the sound of a man whose world had just tilted 3 degrees and was trying to calculate the new angle. "Grandmother," he said carefully in Korean. "She is not. We are not. This is not." "You are 32, his grandmother said. "That is accurate, yes. You have had 3 girlfriends who all said you were emotionally unavailable. This is not the appropriate venue." They were right. "Grandmother, bring water," Grandma Kang said to Secretary Kim, who immediately produced water from somewhere. She handed it to Pearl. Then she looked at Joon-ho with the eyes of a woman who had decided something and historically never undecided things. "She stays," Pearl said. "I absolutely do not stay. I need to go to." "She is announcing the engagement," Secretary Kim translated with the specific expression of a man standing very close to an explosion. "She is announcing the what?" "The engagement, Ms. Milan." "Between who?" "Between you and," he gestured very carefully at Joon-ho. "Between me and a man I met 40 minutes ago over a ribbon?" Grandma Kang said, "It is settled." Pearl turned to Joon-ho. "Tell her it is not settled." Joon-ho looked at his grandmother. "Grandmother. She is not, this is not, we don't." "You are emotionally unavailable," Grandma Kang said simply. "She is not. She is the balance. That is not how engagements work. It is how they work in this family." She reached into her tote bag, the IMF crisis tote, and produced a small box. Not a ring box. A card. She placed it on the table. She said in English, looking directly at Pearl, "You will stay for dinner." Pearl said, "I want to say several things right now." "Good. Say them at dinner." "I want to leave. Leave after dinner. I want my suitcase returned to the airport and a full explanation of how any of this has happened. Also dinner." "This woman," Pearl said, to nobody in particular and everybody at once, "is responding to everything I say with dinner." "She is very focused," Secretary Kim confirmed. Pearl put her face in her hands. Through her palms she said, "I just wanted rice and peace." There was a pause. Then Grandma Kang patted Pearl's shoulder with exactly the same energy as every grandmother who had ever decided you were staying, and that was final. Pearl looked up. Joon-ho was watching her with his unreadable face, but something in his eyes was different from 40 minutes ago. Something that had previously been closed was not entirely closed anymore. He looked like someone who had received unexpected data and hadn't yet decided what to do with it. Pearl pointed at him. You need to fix this," he said. "I am working on it. Work faster." "I will try. Try right now." His phone rang again. He looked at it. His face did the controlled dread thing again. Secretary Kim leaned in. "Sir, the media is outside." Joon-ho looked at the window. 40 floors down, barely visible, was a small crowd near the building entrance. What are they here for? Secretary Kim paused with the expression of someone about to say something they deeply did not want to say. Someone tweeted that KangStar CEO's foreign fiancé arrived from the airport and bypassed executive security to deliver a direct regulatory analysis, and it has been retweeted 60,000 times in the last 22 minutes. The conference room was very quiet. Pearl said, "Someone tweeted what? 60,000. I know what 60,000 means. Who tweeted it?" Everyone at the table looked at one hand that had gone up and was now slowly going back down. The junior executive who had been typing very fast said in a very small voice, "I thought it was a positive narrative for the company's public image." Pearl stood up. She was not a tall woman. She was 5'4" and currently running on rice and 19 hours of accumulated fury. But she stood up and looked at that junior executive, and he appeared to wish he had chosen a different career. She said, "I am a student. I study urban planning. I came to Seoul on a scholarship. I do not want to be anyone's fiancé. I do not want to be in any newspaper. I do not want 60,000. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. She had 93 notifications from a WhatsApp group called Milan Family International. The most recent message was from her mother. "Pearl, your uncle's friend in Seoul just sent me an article. Why is your face on Korean news? Call me. I am calm. I am not calm. Call me." Pearl put the phone face down on the table. She looked at the ceiling. She said, "I would like to speak with whoever is in charge of making things make sense." Everyone in the room looked at Joon-ho. Joon-ho looked at Pearl. He said, "That would typically be me." "Great. Make this make sense." A pause. Then, for the first time since the airport, something shifted in his face that was unmistakably human. Not a smile exactly, but the cousin of one. "I am working on it. You keep saying that. The situation keeps evolving. Make it stop evolving. I am also working on that." They looked at each other across the conference room table, while 15 executives pretended to find their documents very interesting, and Grandma Kong ate a piece of fruit from somewhere and watched them like she was watching her favorite drama, and it was going exactly as planned. "Okay, we have reached the absolute center of this chaos. And if you have been with me from the airport to this boardroom without pausing, you are the kind of person this channel was built for. Drop a comment right now. Where are you watching from? What time is it? I need to know who's up at 2 a.m. for Pearl's disaster. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the moment, because we are nowhere near done. Like this video, share it with the friend who also just wants rice and peace but somehow always ends up in chaos. Now, back to Seoul. What happened next was the kind of thing that could only happen because a lie is much easier to start than to stop. Joon-ho had a choice. He could walk downstairs, face 60 reporters, and say, "This woman is a postgraduate student from Africa who accidentally ended up in my car due to a luggage mix-up and has no professional connection to this company." This was the truth. The truth was very simple and took less than 30 seconds to say. He did not say it. He did not say it because his company had been under investigation for potential financial irregularities by the Regulatory Commission for 6 weeks, because the commission was sending an auditor whose identity was classified, because the board was terrified, because his grandmother had just announced an engagement in front of 15 executives and 60,000 tweet impressions, and because, and this was the part he would not think about directly for another 2 weeks, Pearl Milan had walked into his professional disaster with her red ribbon and her grandmother's portrait and her unfiltered commentary about document length, and he found himself, for reasons he could not yet categorize, not immediately trying to remove her from the situation. Instead, he said to Secretary Kim, "Prepare a statement." Secretary Kim's eyes went briefly wide. A statement saying, a statement that neither confirms nor denies. "Sir, the 60,000 retweets already. Neither confirms nor denies." Secretary Kim took a breath. He had worked for Joon-ho for 6 years. He had drafted statements about earnings reports, labor disputes, a factory fire, and one deeply unfortunate incident involving the chairman's car and a parking structure in Busan. He had never drafted a statement about an accidental fiancé. "Neither confirms nor denies," he said, writing it down. "Also," Joon-ho looked at Pearl, "we should discuss the terms." Pearl said, "What terms?" "Of the arrangement." "What arrangement?" "Temporary. Discretionary. Beneficial to both parties." Pearl picked up her bag, stood up, and looked at him with the bright, furious clarity of someone who had decided. I am leaving. Right now. Whatever arrangement is in this building, it is not my arrangement. I am going to Yonsei University, I am going to find my dormitory, and I am going to sleep. Good night, CEO Kong, Grandma Kong, Secretary Kim, and everyone else in this building who has conspired today to ruin my arrival. Good night. She walked toward the elevator. Secretary Kim stepped forward. Ms. Milan. She kept walking. The reporters are in the lobby. She stopped. She turned around. She said, How many? At last count, 47. She stood there. She said, Is there another exit? There is. However, it requires passing through the executive floor and the private. Show me. It leads to the penthouse car park. That is fine. The penthouse is on the 42nd floor. I can go down from there. To access the car park, you need to go through the penthouse itself. A pause. Whose penthouse? Everyone looked at Joon-ho. Pearl closed her eyes. She kept them closed for 3 full seconds. When she opened them, she said, Of course it is. The penthouse was the kind of space that happened when a person had more money than they'd ever fully understand, and an architect with no instinct for warmth. Everything was clean lines and floor-to-ceiling glass and very expensive minimalism. It smelled like cedar and discipline. There was one photograph on the entire wall, a landscape. There were no family photos. No clutter. Not a single warm or unnecessary object. Pearl walked through it toward the elevator to the private car park and tried very hard not to look at any of it, because looking at it made her feel sorry for someone she was currently quite annoyed with. She didn't make it. She stopped in front of a single framed piece on a side table. Not a photograph. A child's drawing. Crayon. A stick figure in a suit next to a taller stick figure with a crown. Labeled in child's handwriting. Me and Grandma. She looked at it for longer than she meant to. Behind her, Joon-ho said, The elevator is to the left. I see it. She didn't move immediately. You kept this. It was drawn by my younger cousin. You kept it on display. It was a gift. In your penthouse. Alone. It's the only personal thing in this room. A long pause. The elevator is to the left, he said again. She turned around. He was standing by the door, hands in his pockets, watching her with the expression she was beginning to recognize as his default setting. Everything contained, everything processed quietly, everything behind glass. She said, How long has your grandmother been trying to marry you off? Since I was 28. For years. She is persistent. I noticed. Pearl shifted her bag on her shoulder. She really believes the things she says. She's not performing it. No, he said quietly. She is not. She genuinely thinks I'm a blessing of fortune. She decided in the first 30 seconds. My grandmother has always done this. She meets someone, and in 30 seconds she knows. Knows what? Whether they're honest. He paused. She's usually right. Pearl looked at him for a moment. Then she said, I still have to leave. I know. This whole situation is irregular. I was going to say insane. Also accurate. She walked to the elevator. She pressed the button. The doors opened immediately. She stepped in and turned around. He was still standing by the door. She said, Your document really is too long. Something moved in his face. I know. 6 pages. That's all you need. I'll tell the legal team. Good. The doors started to close. Through the narrowing gap she added, And your grandmother is wonderful. The doors closed. In the car park, a driver was waiting. Secretary Kim had called ahead, apparently, because Secretary Kim had apparently developed the ability to anticipate every possible outcome simultaneously. The car took her to Yonsei University in 40 minutes, and she was in her dormitory room by 11 p.m. She had been in Seoul for 5 hours. She had eaten rice in a billionaire's boardroom, been declared engaged without her consent, appeared on 60,000 tweets, walked through a penthouse that felt like a beautiful prison, and she still didn't have her green suitcase. She sat on her dormitory bed and called her mother. Her mother answered on the first ring. Pearl. Mama. I am safe. Why is your face on Korean news? It is a misunderstanding. The article says you are engaged to a CEO. It is a large misunderstanding. Pearl Ama Milan. I sent you to Seoul for education. I am aware. I did not send you to Seoul to become a Chaebol wife. I am not a Chaebol wife. Your Auntie Efua says Chaebols are very rich. Auntie Efua is. She is calling the CEO handsome. Auntie Efua has not seen the CEO. She has seen the photograph. Pearl pinched the bridge of her nose. What photograph? The one from the tweet. Standing next to you in the corridor. He is very tall. That photograph was taken without my knowledge. You look good in it. Mama. I am just saying. You both look. There is a word. Don't. Compatible. Mama. There was the sound of her mother adjusting on the other end of the phone and the background noise of her Auntie Efua saying something very fast and excited. Her mother said, Are you going to see him again? Pearl said, I am going to class. Tomorrow. Like a student. Which is what I am. You should call him. I don't have his number. The secretary. Good night, Mama. If you see the grandmother again. Good night. She seems like a good woman. Good night. She hung up. She lay on her dormitory bed fully dressed, staring at the ceiling, with her bag on her chest containing her grandmother's portrait and her skincare and her laptop, and she thought, I need to make absolutely sure that tomorrow is normal. Tomorrow was not normal. She arrived at the university registration office at 9 in the morning, having slept 7 hours and feeling almost human. She got in line. She filled out 3 forms. She was told her registration was complete and her student ID would be ready in 2 business days. She went to the campus coffee shop and ordered an Americano and a sandwich and sat down at a small table by the window and opened her laptop and started reading the course syllabus for urban planning systems. For exactly 11 minutes, she was a regular person. Then Secretary Kim walked into the coffee shop. He was wearing a suit. In a university coffee shop. He looked at Pearl the way a man looks at someone he has been sent to find. He sat down across from her with the posture of someone delivering news and unsure how it would be received. Pearl said, No. Ms. Milan. Whatever you're about to say. No. There has been a development. No. The Regulatory Commission. I am not from the Regulatory Commission. We are aware of that now, yes. Pearl put down her sandwich. What do you mean now? Secretary Kim straightened his tie. There was some confusion yesterday regarding your identity and affiliation. The board had certain assumptions that we have since clarified internally. Good. Then there's no development. There is, however, a secondary development. What? He placed a folder on the table. Inside was a document. She looked at it. It appeared to be a legal document. Her name was on it. She said, Why is my name on a legal document? The airport bag situation was investigated. Yes. Good. So you've returned my bag. Your bag has been returned to the airport lost property office, yes. However, during the investigation of the bag swap, it was discovered that the bag you received at the airport, the black bag, contained, in addition to Mr. Kang's personal items, a secondary sealed envelope. Okay. Which, when opened as part of the investigation, contained confidential documents related to the Daejeon Biotech merger. And those documents are now being handled by the appropriate people. They are. However, he tapped the folder. 1 page of those documents was a preliminary shareholder allocation list. For the merger. What does that have to do with me? Secretary Kim looked at the folder. He looked at Pearl. He said, with the focused calm of a man describing something that should not be possible. Your name is on it. Pearl looked at the folder. She looked at him. She said, My name is on a shareholder allocation list. 5% of the merged entity. That is impossible. We agree. I have never interacted with Daejeon Biotech or KangStar Group before yesterday. Also agreed. So how is my name on this document? Secretary Kim cleared his throat. That is what the legal team is investigating. However, the preliminary theory is that the original document, which was prepared some months ago for a private shareholder arrangement, contained the name of a previous KangStar partner. The name was listed as P. Milan. Pearl stared at him. P. Milan. It is believed to refer to a different person. An Arthur Milan, who was a brief early investor in the merger concept before withdrawing 18 months ago. However, due to a clerical error, the name was not updated on this specific document. He paused. And when your bag was mixed with the CEOs at the airport, and your identity was, let us say, vigorously asserted, the document was flagged under your name. Pearl sat very still for a moment. Then she said, So the document that was in the bag that I chased because it had my ribbon on it, that document has a name on it that is almost my name, and now, because of a clerical error and a ribbon and approximately 90 minutes of chaos, I am somehow accidentally attached to a shareholder arrangement I know nothing about. That is an accurate summary, yes. And this is fixable. It is. So fix it. We are in the process of doing so. However, he tapped the folder again. Until it is fixed, which requires a joint legal review, a correction filing with the financial authorities, and confirmation from the original Arthur Milan that he withdrew his stake. Your name remains on this document as an active entry. Pearl picked up her coffee. She drank it slowly. She put it down. How long does the correction take? At minimum, 2 weeks. 2 weeks. The regulatory filing period requires. 2 weeks, she repeated. Yes. She looked out the window at the university campus. Students were walking between buildings. A group was laughing near a fountain. Someone was feeding pigeons. It was completely normal and completely far away from her current reality. She said, and in the meantime, Secretary Kim said, you are technically, on paper, a 5% stakeholder in the Daejeon KangStar merger entity. A pause. And the engagement announcement that your grandmother made yesterday, Pearl said slowly. Secretary Kim's expression shifted. The one that has 60,000 tweets. More shifting. Is that also technically in some kind of record somewhere? Secretary Kim said, with the expression of someone deeply, personally sorry about the next thing they were going to say. Grandma Kong filed a formal family notice this morning. With the family office. It is not legally binding. However, it is, in the context of the Kong family, considered a commitment of intent. Pearl said, I want to go back to the airport. I understand. I want to get back on the plane. That is understandable. I would like, specifically, to reverse the last 24 hours. We are all very. Is the CEO aware of the shareholder situation? He was brief this morning. What did he say? Secretary Kim paused. He said, and I am quoting directly, of course he did. Pearl almost laughed. She stopped herself. She didn't quite stop herself. A small sound came out of her that was at least 40% laugh despite everything. She said, does he want to meet? Secretary Kim said, with something that might have been relief. He is available at 12. She looked at her sandwich. She looked at her syllabus. She looked at the fountain through the window with the pigeons and the normal students. She said, tell him 1 o'clock. I have class at 10. Secretary Kim stood, adjusted his jacket, and said, of course, Ms. Milan. He walked 2 steps. Then he turned back. For what it's worth, he said, Grandma Kong has very good instincts. That is not the comfort you think it is. No, he agreed. But it is true. He left. Pearl looked at her course syllabus. Urban Planning Systems, Module 1. Understanding Infrastructure in Rapidly Developing Cities. She thought about infrastructure. She thought about rapidly developing situations. She thought about a CEO with 1 crayon drawing in his penthouse, and a grandmother with a crisis-era tote bag, and a shareholder document, with almost her name on it, and 60,000 people on the internet who had decided something about her life that she hadn't decided herself. She finished her sandwich. She went to class. At 1 o'clock she arrived at KangStar Group, went through the lobby. The receptionist recognized her and bowed, which was unsettling, and was taken by elevator directly to the 38th floor. Not the penthouse this time. A smaller conference room. Just Joon-ho and Secretary Kim. Joon-ho was standing by the window when she came in. He turned when she entered. He was wearing the same controlled, expensive, impeccable CEO energy as yesterday. But something about the posture was different. Marginally. Like he had made a decision about something before she arrived, and was now waiting to see whether the decision held. He said, thank you for coming. She said, you have 2 weeks to fix the shareholder situation. We are working on it. I know you are. I need you to understand that this is your priority. Not the merger, not the media, not your grandmother's timeline for whatever she has planned. The shareholder correction is the priority. Agreed. Good. She sat down. Now explain the engagement thing. He sat across from her. My grandmother's announcement is not legally binding. I know, Secretary Kim explained. But it is in the family record. It is. Which means the family office has flagged it. Which means certain parties, relatives, business associates, the family's matchmaking coordinator. Your family has a matchmaking coordinator? Her name is Mrs. O. She has been employed by the family for 11 years. Pearl put her hand over her face. Is she already, has she? She called this morning. Of course she did. She has prepared a binder. A binder? She prepares binders for all perspective. There is a binder about me. A preliminary one. How thick is the binder? Joon-ho said. I did not open it. Why not? Because I'm not, he stopped. He started again. The situation is not. I have not agreed to anything. Neither have I. I am aware. They looked at each other. Two people who had each been pulled into a situation by a ribbon and a grandmother and 60,000 people on the internet, sitting across from each other in a conference room with the city of Seoul spread behind them, trying to figure out where the edges of the problem were. Pearl said, Here is what I propose. Yes, we fix the shareholder situation in 2 weeks. We say nothing publicly about the engagement. We do not confirm or deny. We let the story get boring and go away on its own. I go to my classes. You run your company. We have no further interaction except as necessary for the legal correction. Joon-ho said, My grandmother. What about her? She will not consider the engagement resolved until. I'm not asking you to resolve it with her. I'm asking you to not escalate it publicly. She has already invited you to Sunday dinner. Pearl stared at him. When? This morning. She called the university's international student office and left a message. She called the. Pearl took a breath. How did she know which university? My grandmother, Joon-ho said carefully, has a very comprehensive network. She is 71 years old. She has been building the network for 71 years. Pearl sat back in her chair. She looked at the ceiling. She said, What happens if I go to Sunday dinner? He said, You eat. And then you leave. And your grandmother will consider the process appropriately initiated. And then we return to your proposed arrangement. 2 weeks. No public escalation. Legal correction. Separate lives. But I have to eat Sunday dinner first. She makes very good food. That is not the point. No, but it is true. Pearl said, Is this a negotiation? It is a situation assessment. You want me to go to Sunday dinner to pacify your grandmother, so she doesn't escalate the engagement in public while the shareholder thing is still on paper. A pause. Yes. And in exchange, I personally guarantee the legal correction is filed as a priority case. I have a direct relationship with the commission's chief officer. Standard timeline is 2 weeks. I can make it 10 days. Pearl studied him. 10 days. 10 days. And Sunday dinner. Sunday dinner. And then we're done. Something in his expression. Very small. Very brief. Then we are done, he said. She picked up her bag. She stood up. She said, Fine. Sunday dinner. 10 days. And the 43-page document becomes 6 pages, or I am not responsible for what I say in that boardroom if your grandmother drags me back in there. He almost smiled. That is reasonable. Your whole life should be more reasonable. I am beginning to understand that. She walked to the elevator. He walked with her because apparently that was what he did. The elevator opened. She stepped in. She turned around. She said, Was there ever actually an auditor coming? He said, Thursday. Her name is Ms. Young. She has been doing this for 20 years. So even if I weren't me, this whole situation would have. No, he said. This situation is specifically because you are you. The doors closed. Pearl rode the elevator down 40 floors and walked through the lobby past the receptionist who bowed and out into the afternoon Seoul sunshine and stood on the pavement outside KangStar Group headquarters and thought, 10 days. Sunday dinner. Then back to normal. She believed this completely, which was of course the problem. But first, the rival company had to happen. Because on Wednesday, 1 day before the actual auditor, 3 days after the airport, Pearl was in her urban planning lecture when her phone buzzed 7 times in a row, which she ignored because she was a student and students did not look at their phones in lecture. Then it buzzed 14 more times in a row, which she also ignored. Then a notification appeared on her screen from a news app she hadn't even known she'd installed that said, KangStar CEO's foreign fiancé exposed as fraudulent corporate plant. Rival firm Daejin Media alleges elaborate scheme. She looked at this for a very long time. She said out loud, in the middle of a lecture on metropolitan zoning regulations, What? 30 heads turned. She said, Sorry. Urban planning issue. Nobody believed her. She stepped outside the lecture hall, read the article in full, and felt several things happen to her face simultaneously. The article, published by Daejin Media, a subsidiary of Daejin Biotech, which was the company KangStar was trying to merge with, claimed that an unnamed source within KangStar had confirmed that the woman identified as Joon-ho's fiancée was in fact a corporate plant, brought in to distract regulators from the merger irregularities, and that her entire identity as a student was a fabricated cover. "I am an actual student," Pearl said to her phone. Her phone did not respond. It buzzed again. Secretary Kim. She picked up. "I saw the article. Ms. Milan." Secretary Kim's voice had the quality of a man who had been managing crises since 6 in the morning and had now moved through stress into a kind of serene professional exhaustion. "Mr. Kong would like to speak with you at your earliest convenience." "My earliest convenience is in 40 minutes when my lecture ends." "He is available now." "I am not available now." "I am available in 40 minutes." "He is." Secretary Kim. "I did not plant myself. I followed a ribbon. Are we clear on that?" "Abundantly clear, Ms. Milan." "Then in 40 minutes. She hung up. She went back into the lecture. She sat down. She stared at the front of the room where her professor was drawing zoning maps and thought about the fact that a corporate media outlet had decided she was a spy, which was objectively the second most absurd thing that had happened to her since she landed, right behind the engagement. 41 minutes later, she was in a car to KangStar. Joon-ho was not in the conference room when she arrived. He was standing in the lobby with Secretary Kim and 2 men in suits she hadn't seen before, and all 4 of them were looking at something on a tablet with the focused concern of people who had found something very unwelcome. He looked up when she came in. He said, "Thank you for coming." She said, "Tell me about Dae-jin." They went upstairs. In the conference room, the big 138th floor, 3 of the executives from the first meeting were present, plus a woman Pearl hadn't seen before who had the energy of a lawyer and the expression of someone who had already planned 7 steps ahead and found them all acceptable. The lawyer woman said, "Ms. Milan, I'm Chief Legal Officer Bae. I'll be brief. The Dae-jin article is a deliberate interference strategy. Dae-jin Biotech and KangStar have been in merger discussions, but Dae-jin's media arm is controlled by a faction within their board that opposes the merger. They saw the coverage of your arrival and decided to use it to destabilize. To destabilize me or the merger? Both. They're hoping public controversy around your identity creates enough distraction to delay the regulatory review." Pearl said, "So they are using me, a person who came here to study urban planning, as a tool in a corporate strategy battle." "That is accurate. And the best response is? Ideally, a controlled public clarification. We confirm your identity as a student, distance it from any official KangStar affiliation, and the engagement announcement." CLO Bae looked at Joon-ho. Joon-ho looked at Pearl. Pearl said, "Because if you clarify that I'm just a student with no KangStar connection, the natural question is why your grandmother announced an engagement." "Yes," CLO Bae said. "And if you explain the engagement, you have to explain the ribbon and the airport and the whole situation, which makes the company look chaotic." "Also yes. So either I'm a plant, or I'm a random student your CEO accidentally brought home from the airport and his grandmother immediately decided to marry off. We prefer the term organic acquaintance that developed in a contextual. Both options are bad for you," CLO Bae said. "The second option is considerably less legally problematic. The second option makes your CEO look like he cannot be trusted to go to the airport without generating a public incident." Joon-ho said very quietly, "That is also accurate." Pearl turned to him. She looked at him for a long moment. She said, "Are you worried?" He said after a pause. "About the merger, yes. About the coverage." Another pause. "Less than I expected to be." "Why less?" "Because I know what the actual situation is. And I find that I am not particularly concerned about how it reflects on me personally." "You should be a little concerned. I have 60,000 tweets. I have read several of them. And something that was not quite a smile. The consensus appears to be that you are, and I am quoting, exactly what he needs." Pearl said, "The internet has lost its mind." "Frequently," he agreed. CLO Bae cleared her throat because she was a woman with an agenda, and this conversation had deviated from it. "The proposal is this. Ms. Milan gives a brief voluntary statement confirming her student status and clarifying that her connection to KangStar is personal rather than professional. We handle the merger review separately. Dae-jin loses their narrative leverage." Pearl said, "And the personal connection can be characterized as an ongoing acquaintance. An ongoing acquaintance, with the understanding that the nature of the acquaintance is not yet categorized." Pearl looked at CLO Bae. She looked at Secretary Kim. She looked at the 3 executives. She looked at Joon-ho. She said, "You want me to do a press statement? A very brief one. About my personal life. Only the relevant. In front of cameras. We have a communications team who can." "I am a student," Pearl said. "I came here to study. I have been in Seoul for 3 days and I have done a boardroom review, been declared engaged, appeared in 60,000 tweets, been called a corporate plant by a media outlet I had never heard of before today, and now I am being asked to do a press statement." She paused. "My professor is going to email me about my attendance." Secretary Kim said very quietly, "We can provide a letter of explanation. I do not need a letter from KangStar Group to excuse my absence from urban planning." Everyone flinched. One of the executives wrote something down. It was probably "do not suggest letter." Then Pearl took a breath. She said, "Fine. Brief statement. No cameras. Written only." CLO Bay said, "That's written only. My words. You can check it for legal issues, but you cannot change what I want to say." "Understood. And after the statement, the Daejin situation is between you and Daejin, and I am not involved." "Of course. And someone tells me why Daejin's faction was opposed to the merger before any of this started. Because based on what I read in that 43-page document." She stopped. The room was very quiet. Joon-ho said, "You read the document." "I skimmed it. In the conference room. On day 1. While everyone was deciding I was an auditor." She looked at him. "Your merger terms are not balanced. Daejin brings more intellectual property than KangStar, but the equity split doesn't reflect that. The faction opposing the merger is probably right to oppose it. Not because the merger is wrong, but because the terms as written benefit KangStar disproportionately." CLO Bay's pen had stopped moving. CFO Park, who had been silent in the corner, slowly put down his coffee. Joon-ho said, "You skimmed a 43-page merger document while eating rice. I'm a fast reader. And I study infrastructure systems, which includes financing models." She shrugged. "Fix the equity split. The merger goes through. Daejin's opposition faction loses their argument. You don't need to fight a media battle if you remove the legitimate grievance underneath it." The room was very, very quiet. CFO Park said, almost to himself, "She's right." Joon-ho was looking at Pearl with the expression she was beginning to understand as his version of being genuinely surprised. Contained and still but different around the eyes, like a window with the lock undone. She said, "I will go write my statement. Can someone show me to a desk?" Secretary Kim showed her to a desk. She sat down. She wrote 4 sentences. She emailed them to CLO Bay. The statement said, "I am Pearl Milan, a postgraduate student enrolled at Yonsei University. I arrived in Seoul on scholarship 3 days ago. I have no professional affiliation with KangStar Group. My connection to the Kang family is personal and ongoing and none of Daejin Media's business." CLO Bay read it and said it was the most efficient press statement she had ever received in 22 years of corporate law. The Daejin Media article was effectively neutralized by the next morning because the moment Pearl's statement was published, the internet decided she was clearly genuine and that Daejin Media was obviously running interference. And then someone did a deep dive on Daejin Media's history of publishing strategically timed articles during merger negotiations, and that became the story instead. And by Thursday morning, Daejin Biotech's opposition faction was dealing with their own public relations problem and had considerably less energy to spend on Pearl. On the ride back to campus, she got a text from a number she didn't recognize. It said, "The equity split adjustment is in review. JH." She stared at it. She looked out the window at the Seoul traffic. She typed back, "Good. Also that document is still too long." She put her phone in her bag. 3 minutes later it buzzed. 1 message. 5 pages. She smiled. She didn't mean to. It happened. Her phone buzzed again. Her mother. She answered. "Pearl. Mama. I saw the statement. Good. None of Daejin Media's business. You said that." "I said that. Your auntie Efua says." Her mother paused. "She says you are exactly what your grandmother would have been if your grandmother had been born in this era." Pearl was quiet for a moment. She said, "That is the nicest thing Auntie Efua has ever said about me. Don't tell her I told you. She will deny it." A pause. "Are you eating?" "Instant noodles." "Pearl. Mama. I am fine. I went to class today. I have an assignment due Friday. I have a Sunday dinner invitation. I am living my life. Sunday dinner with the CEO. Sunday dinner with his grandmother. And the CEO. And yes, also the CEO. Her mother said nothing for a moment. Then, your grandmother used to say, when something unexpected enters your path, look at it before you step around it. Because sometimes the unexpected thing is the thing you were walking toward all along. Pearl was quiet. She also said, her mother added, always double-check your bag at the airport. Mama. Both pieces of advice apply here. Good night, Mama. You both looked. Good night. She hung up. She finished the call. She sat in the car watching Seoul go past and thought, 10 days. Sunday dinner. Back to normal. And then on Thursday, Ms. Young, the actual auditor, arrived and discovered the document with Pearl's name still on it and flagged it immediately as a potential conflict of interest given the public engagement announcement and the media coverage. And this required a second filing. And the second filing required a statement from Pearl. And the statement required her presence at KangStar Group. And when she arrived for the statement, Grandma Kang was also there, having heard through her comprehensive 71-year network that Pearl was in the building. Grandma Kang had brought food. She had also brought Mrs. O, the matchmaking coordinator, who had the binder. The binder was thick. Pearl sat down in the conference room across from Joon-ho, who looked at her with the specific expression of a man who had genuinely tried to make 10 days work and was watching it expand. She said, your grandmother brought the matchmaker. I see that. She has a binder. I am aware. The binder is thick. I noticed. Pearl put her arms on the table. Kang Joon-ho. Yes. How thick is my binder? He said very carefully. It has tabs. She dropped her head onto her arms. From across the table, Grandma Kang said in Korean, translated very quietly by a secretary who had accepted this as his life now. She is so natural. No performance. This is exactly right. Mrs. O opened the binder. Pearl lifted her head. What is I in that binder? Mrs. O smiled. She did not answer because she did not speak English. She simply turned one page with the deliberate calm of a woman who had assembled a dossier on approximately 400 people and had never once been wrong about any of them. Secretary Kim translated what Mrs. O said. She says the binder contains a full compatibility assessment. Your educational background. Your publicly shared interests. Your communication style as observed from public interactions. A personality profile based on your behavior during the regulatory review. He paused. Also your food photos. She put my food photos in a binder? They are in Section 4. Under Cultural Engagement and Sensory Appreciation. My rice pictures are under Cultural Engagement. You photographed Dunjang Jigi during the boardroom lunch, Secretary Kim said. Mrs. O considers this a highly significant indicator. I photographed it because it was good. That is the indicator. Grandma Kang said something and patted the table twice. She says a woman who photographs good food is a woman who notices good things. This is the foundation of a good life. Pearl looked at Joon-ho. Are you going to say anything? He said. The soup was very good. That is not what I. Mrs. O has been doing this for 11 years, he said. She has matched 37 couples. 34 marriages. 3 ongoing relationships. What happened to the other 3? 2 decided they preferred friendship. And the third? A pause. The third turned out to already be married, which was a documentation error, not a compatibility failure. Pearl stared at him. She matched someone who was already married. She considers it her only administrative oversight. She considers it. Pearl turned to Mrs. O. Mrs. O met her eyes with complete serenity. Pearl said to Secretary Kim, tell her I am not available for matching. Secretary Kim translated. Mrs. O wrote something in the binder and smiled. What did she write? Pearl demanded. She says that is what 26 of the 37 also said. And they all ended up matched, Secretary Kim confirmed. Yes. I am different. You are Section 1 of the binder. She has never put someone in Section 1 before. What is Section 1? Secretary Kim looked at his shoes very briefly. Priority candidate. Pearl turned slowly to look at Joon-ho with the expression of a woman who had many things to say and was choosing between them very carefully. She chose. Say something. He said. There are noodles at Sunday dinner. She put her head back on her arms. You are not helping. I am also, he said, not helping. Grandma Kang reached over and patted Pearl's shoulder again. She said something softly. Secretary Kim translated very quietly. She says the first 36 candidates in the binder, he never came to the meeting. He would send me with a list of reasons. Today he came himself. and he has not looked at his phone once. Pearl was very still. She did not look up for a long moment. Then she said into her arms, "Mrs. O is writing that down, isn't she?" Section 1, subsection B, Secretary Kim confirmed. She has titled it mutual. She looked at him for a long moment. Grandma Kong was watching them both with the quiet satisfaction of someone watching a plan unfold on its own schedule. Ms. Jung, the auditor, was looking at documents with the focused detachment of a professional who had made peace with the fact that her job regularly placed her in the middle of other people's chaos. Secretary Kim was standing by the wall, maintaining the posture of a man at peace with everything. The city of Seoul pressed itself against all the windows, busy and enormous and completely indifferent to Pearl Milan's plans. She said, "Fine. Sunday dinner," Joon-ho said. "Sunday dinner," she agreed. "But I am telling your grandmother that the engagement is exploratory. She will hear engagement. I know, but I will feel better. That is fair. Nothing about any of this is fair." "No," he said. And something in his voice was different, quieter, more honest, without the CEO's surface. "But it is interesting." Pearl looked at him. Really looked. Not the press photos, not the marble lobby, not the 42 floors of glass. Just the person. The one who kept a crayon drawing in his penthouse. Who said, "I am working on it," until he actually was. She said, "You are the most unusual person I have met since I landed. You have been here 48 hours. Still true," he said. "You are the most unusual person I have met in considerably longer than that." And Grandma Kong made a small triumphant sound that she mostly hid behind her soup container, and Mrs. O wrote something in the binder, and Secretary Kim pressed his earpiece and said quietly to whoever was on the other end, "Advanced Sunday dinner protocol. Full spread. Her grandmother's portrait should have flowers." Pearl heard that last part. She looked at Secretary Kim. She said, "How do you know about the portrait?" Secretary Kim said, "Grandma Kong told me this morning." "How did Grandma Kong know?" "I may have mentioned it," Joon-ho said. Pearl looked at him. He looked at the window. She said, "You told your grandmother about my grandmother's portrait. It came up. It came up. In conversation. She asked what you had with you. I mentioned it." "Why?" A pause. "Because it seemed important to mention." The room was very quiet. Then Pearl said, "My grandmother would have liked you." She paused. She also had absolutely no patience for nonsense, so she would have had a lot of thoughts about this week specifically. But in general she would have liked you. Joon-ho said nothing for a moment. Then, "I would have liked to meet her." And Grandma Kong, who had been pretending to arrange her soup containers but was absolutely listening, made no sound at all because even she understood when to let a moment be what it was. Pearl picked up her bag. She stood. She said, "Sunday." "What time?" 2:00. "Address?" Secretary Kim produced a card from a pocket. "Already prepared." She took it. She walked to the door. She stopped. She said, "Tell your legal team the correction document should reference both P. Milan individuals by full name, date of birth, and country of registration. It will prevent any future confusion." Joon-ho said, "I'll pass it on." "Good." She went through the door. Then, from outside, "Also the document is still too long." Someone in the conference room laughed. Just one person. And then stopped very professionally. Pearl walked down the corridor toward the elevator and thought. 2 weeks was becoming Sunday, and Sunday was becoming something she didn't have a category for yet, and Seoul was larger and louder and more unexpected than any brochure had suggested, and somewhere in the lost property office at Incheon International Airport was a green suitcase with a red ribbon, and she was going to pick it up tomorrow, and she was absolutely going to be, a normal student. She pressed the elevator button. It opened immediately. Secretary Kim's voice floated down the corridor. "Ms. Milan. Sunday dinner. Any dietary restrictions?" She stepped into the elevator. "None. Allergies?" "None. Preference between traditional Korean or mixed menu?" She thought about the rice in the boardroom. She thought about her grandmother saying strong women come from Lagos. She thought about crayon drawings and tabs and binders and a man who looked at the city through glass and kept exactly one personal thing in his home. She said, "Whatever she wants to make." The doors closed. And somewhere on the 38th floor, Grandma Kong heard the report from Secretary Kim and smiled the smile of a woman who had been right about this from the first 30 seconds and had never once doubted it. The shareholder correction was filed in 9 days. The engagement remained, technically, in the family record. And Pearl Milan arrived at Sunday dinner at exactly 2 o'clock, with her grandmother's portrait under her arm, because Grandma Kong had asked to see it, and she had decided that was a reasonable request from an unreasonable situation. And when she walked through the door of the Kong family home and Grandma Kong took one look at the portrait and said in English, "She was strong, your grandmother," Pearl said. Yes. She was, and it was, in a way she had not expected, exactly right. Joon-ho was in the kitchen when she arrived. In an apron, Pearl stood in the doorway of the Kong family home, a house in a quiet part of Songbuk that was large without being showy, old without being neglected. The kind of home that had been lived in by people who understood the difference between having things and needing them. And she looked at Kong Joon-ho in a plain white apron standing at a stove, and she said absolutely nothing because she had not prepared for this. He looked up. "You're early." "I'm exactly on time. Dinner is at 2. "It is 2. He looked at his watch. He said, Were you expecting me to be late?" "I was not expecting you to be precisely on time. I am always on time. You arrived at KangStar 4 days ago, approximately 2 hours before anyone expected. That was different. That was a ribbon emergency." She looked at the apron, at the stove, at the organized calm of a man who apparently cooked with the same meticulous focus he applied to everything else. "You cook? On Sundays? Since when?" "Since I was 12. My grandmother taught me." Pearl looked at the pots, at the steam, at the smell that was filling the kitchen with something warm and deeply, specifically good. She said, "Is that doenjang jjigae?" "Yes." "Is that japchae?" "Yes." "Is that," she looked at a separate pot, smaller, bubbling red and fragrant, "tteokbokki?" Something shifted in his face. Very slightly. "My grandmother said to make it." Pearl remembered what Secretary Kim had told her. For times in 11 years. She looked at the pot for a moment longer than she meant to. Then she said, "You didn't have to. She asked me to." "I know. But you did it." He stirred the jjigae and said nothing, and she understood that this was his version of saying something. Grandma Kong came in from the garden wearing gardening gloves and a canvas hat, and the expression of a woman who had arranged exactly this scene, and was pleased it had unfolded correctly. She looked at Pearl. She looked at Joon-ho. She said in Korean, "Good. You found each other." Secretary Kim translated from somewhere near the doorway. He had materialized again. Pearl was no longer surprised by this. She suspected he simply existed in every room slightly before anyone else did. She said, "Did you follow me here?" "I drove you here, Ms. Milan. And then you came inside." "Grandma Kong invited me for dinner." She invited her grandson's employee for Sunday dinner. Grandma Kong said something. Secretary Kim translated. She says Kim Sung-min has eaten at this table for 6 years and is basically family. "Basically family," Pearl repeated. "I have been with Mr. Kong since before the company went public," Secretary Kim said, with the modest dignity of a man who had earned his place at a table and was comfortable there. "I also bring good wine." He produced a bottle from somewhere. Grandma Kong approved it with a nod. Pearl said, "Is anyone else coming?" Grandma Kong said something. Secretary Kim said, "She says Mrs. O sends her apologies but wanted to relay that she has finalized Section 3 of the binder." Pearl said, "What is Section 3? "Future compatibility projections." She wrote future projections. She does this for all her candidates. "How far into the future?" Secretary Kim checked his phone. "She has written notes through the 5-year mark." Pearl sat down on a kitchen stool because this was the kind of information that required a seat. "There is a binder with 5 years of my future in it." Joon-ho, without looking up from the stove, said, "She had mine done at year 10. 10 years. She was optimistic. Was she right?" A pause. He stirred. "About the professional timeline." "Yes." "About the personal." He set down the spoon and looked at her. "She has been waiting for this part." Pearl said, "This part?" "The part where I stopped sending Secretary Kim to the meetings." Pearl sat with that for a moment. Grandma Kong had found something very interesting to do in the garden, and was doing it with exaggerated focus. Secretary Kim was opening the wine with the practiced discretion of a man who knew when to be invisible. She said quietly, "For days." "I know. This is 4 days." "I know. That is not enough time to know anything. Usually I would agree with you." "But," he said, "but I have been running this company for 7 years, and in those 7 years I have made approximately 4,000 decisions, and every one of them I made because I looked at the available information, accounted for the unknown variables, and committed to a direction. He picked up the spoon again. I am doing the same thing. Pearl said, You are telling me you are making a decision about me like a corporate acquisition. No. I am telling you I make decisions the same way regardless of what they are. The method is the same. The feeling, he paused, is different. She said, Different how? He said, The corporate decisions don't make me want to be here at 2 o'clock exactly. The kitchen was very quiet except for the pot and the garden sounds, and somewhere the cork coming out of the wine bottle. Then Grandma Kong called something from the garden, loud and cheerful, and Secretary Kim translated. She says stop talking and set the table, or the jjigae will be overcooked. Joon-ho handed Pearl a stack of bowls without a word. She took them. She set the table. It was a round table, small enough that everyone at it would be close, old wood that had the warmth of 1,000 meals. She set 4 places. She put her grandmother's portrait on the windowsill because she had brought it, because Grandma Kong had asked to see it, and because some things deserved to be in the room. Grandma Kong came inside and saw the portrait and stopped. She stood in front of it for a long time. She said, in the English she deployed carefully and precisely, She was strong, your grandmother. Pearl said, Yes, she was. Grandma Kong nodded once. She touched the frame very lightly. She said, Strong women make strong daughters. She said nothing else and went to sit at the table, and Pearl stood by the windowsill for a moment and breathed and felt something settle in her chest that had been unsettled since the airport. Dinner was loud. Grandma Kong had opinions about everything and shared all of them without pause. She critiqued Joon-ho's japchae seasoning, praised Pearl for eating without being told to eat more, told 3 separate stories about the 1997 financial crisis that all ended with her personally outwitting someone, asked Pearl 11 questions about Lagos, compared 2 of the answers favorably to Busan, declared that doenjang jjigae was proof of cultural wisdom regardless of country, and ate 3 portions of tteokbokki. Pearl matched her portion for portion and question for question, and at some point stopped tracking which language anyone was speaking because Secretary Kim's translations and Grandma Kang's direct English and the food and the window and the portrait were all part of the same thing, and the same thing was, without her having planned it, good. After dinner, Grandma Kong produced the photographs. She produced them the way she produced everything, completely, without asking, having already decided. Albums. Actual physical albums, the old kind with the sticky pages, starting from before Joon-ho was born and going forward through decades of a family that had faced, based on the photographic evidence, considerable difficulty and also considerable joy, and had not seemed to distinguish sharply between the two. She found the photograph and placed it in front of Pearl with the satisfaction of someone revealing a punchline. Joon-ho at approximately 8 years old. Tiny suit. Standing very straight. Next to Grandma Kong, who was wearing a crown made of paper and looking exactly like herself except 30 years younger. He was holding her hand. His face had the expression of a child who was trying very hard to be serious and also wanted very badly to smile and was not sure which was correct. Pearl said, He's wearing the crown from the drawing. Grandma Kong said, Every Sunday. He made me a new one every Sunday for 2 years. You let him make you a paper crown. A grandmother takes what her grandchild gives her. She tapped the photograph. Every Sunday he also made me food. Terrible food. I ate all of it. Pearl looked at the photograph. She looked at Joon-ho, who was standing slightly behind her looking at the window. She said to him, You tried to cook for her when you were 8. He said, I burned the rice 5 times. She ate it. She said it was fine. It wasn't fine, was it? Pearl said to Grandma Kong. Grandma Kong said, The 5th time was fine. Pearl laughed. Fully. Open and real and completely surprised by itself. The laugh came out of her before she had any chance to decide whether to let it. It was the laugh of someone who had not expected this Sunday and was glad they came anyway. Joon-ho heard it. He turned from the window. He looked at her laughing over his 8-year-old photograph with his grandmother's hand on her arm, and he stood very still for a moment with the expression of a man who has received information that is going to change his category system significantly and is only just beginning to understand the scale of the adjustment. Grandma Kong looked at him looking at Pearl. She picked up her wine. She said very quietly in Korean to Secretary Kim, who was pretending to look at a bookshelf, Tell Mrs. O to title section 1 confirmed. Secretary Kim pressed his earpiece with the serenity of a man at peace with everything. Already texted, ma'am. The document was 6 pages. The shareholder correction was filed in 9 days. The engagement remained, technically, in the family record. And Pearl Milan stayed for Sunday dinner and ate tteokbokki that had been made 4 times in 11 years, and laughed at a photograph of a small boy in a paper-crowned sundae, and walked home through Seoul at 5 in the evening when the light was low and gold, and the city was doing that thing cities do in the hour before dark where everything looks briefly, quietly possible. She called her mother from the street. Her mother answered immediately. How was it? Fine. Just fine. It was good. And I ate very well. And the CEO. He cooked. A pause that was extremely loud despite containing no words. Mama. I said nothing. Your silence is saying everything. I am simply sitting here. You are sitting there being smug. I am sitting here thinking about what your grandmother said. About looking at the unexpected thing. Pearl stopped walking. She stood on a Seoul pavement in the gold light and thought about that. She thought about ribbons and boardrooms and binders with tabs, and a photograph of a boy making a paper crown every Sunday for 2 years, and the smell of doenjang jjigae from a kitchen she had not expected to end up in. She said, It's 4 days, Mama. Your grandmother met your grandfather and knew in one afternoon. That was different. Your grandfather also said that. Pearl started walking again. Good night, Mama. Call me tomorrow. I have class tomorrow. Call me after class. Good night. He cooked, her mother said, with the specific satisfaction of a woman filing information away permanently. Good. Good night. She hung up. She walked. Seoul moved around her, busy and certain of itself, enormous and indifferent, and also, she was beginning to understand, not indifferent at all, just large enough to hold more than one thing at once. She just wanted rice and peace. She got Seoul and Joon-ho and Grandma Kang's tteokbokki, and a binder with her future in Section 3, and a red ribbon that had started all of it. Close enough. And that is a wrap, and if you made it all the way to the end of this chaos with Pearl, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, drop in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. Are you in Atlanta at midnight? Accra on a lunch break? Seoul at sunrise? Atlanta at 3 a.m.? I need to know. Second, hit like, hit share, and if you are not subscribed yet, the subscribe button is right there, and this is exactly the moment to press it because new story is coming and you cannot be on the outside. And third, for my members and future members, join the channel membership. Members get early access behind the scenes, and they get to name the chaos. Link in the description. See you in the next one. Don't go anywhere.
I'm laughing
Pearl is
so
just getting
hard
started.
right now. That's amazing. I love you so much.